The captive princess and the gladiator's arrival. The cold, damp air smelled of blood and rust. Princess Zara sat on the hard stone floor of her prison cell, her back against the wall. Chains wrapped around her wrists, their metal biting into her skin. She had once worn robes of silk and gold, symbols of her royal bloodline. Now all that remained was a tattered cloak and a crown of dust. Outside, the arena roared. The sound of thousands of alien voices echoed through the underground cells. Zara knew what that sound meant. Another warrior had fallen. Another life lost for the entertainment of the warlord Gornak. She had been here for weeks, watching from the darkness, waiting for her turn to be dragged into the pit. But she did not scream. She did not beg. She was a princess, and she would not break. Heavy footsteps approached. The iron gate creaked open. A guard stepped inside, his reptilian eyes cold. "New fighter," he growled, throwing a prisoner into the cell across from her. Zara barely lifted her gaze. She had seen many warriors enter these cells, and she had seen them leave, only to return as lifeless bodies dragged across the sand. But then something strange happened. The new prisoner stood up. Most fighters collapsed in exhaustion when they were thrown into these cages. But this one, he rose to his feet in one smooth motion. Zara finally looked at him. He was human, a rare sight in this part of the galaxy. She had only heard of them in stories. Primitive creatures from a distant world, weak compared to most species. She expected him to look afraid. Instead, he smirked. "Nice place," the human said, rolling his shoulders as if he had just woken from a nap. "Bit cold, though." Zara frowned. He was different. No fear, no panic. Even the strongest warriors had fear in their eyes when they arrived. But this one, he was amused. The guard grunted. "Enjoy your last moments, human. The crowd will feast on your screams soon enough." The human didn't reply. He simply sat down, resting his back against the bars. His eyes met Zara's, studying her for a moment before speaking. "You look important," he said. Zara turned away. "And you look like a dead man." The human chuckled. "Not yet." Before she could respond, a loud horn blasted through the arena. The ground trembled as the gates to the battlefield opened. The guards came, dragging the human to his feet. "Time to die," one of them hissed. Zara expected the human to resist, to struggle against the guards like all the others. But he walked with them willingly, as if he had chosen this. As he stepped into the arena, the crowd erupted in laughter. A human, one of the spectators mocked. "Pathetic. This will be over in seconds." Another shouted. Zara stood at the bars of her cage, watching. She knew how this would end. The first opponent would be a monster, some massive four-armed brute with claws like blades. The human would hesitate, maybe try to run. The beast would strike once, then silence. But she was wrong. The beast charged at the human, roaring loud enough to shake the walls. The human did not move. Zara clenched her fists. "Move, fool," she whispered. The beast lunged, its massive claw swinging down, and in the blink of an eye, the human dodged. Not just dodged. He moved like a shadow, quick and precise, ducking under the attack as if he had seen it coming before it even happened. The crowd gasped. The beast roared again, slashing wildly. But the human was faster. He twisted, weaving through the deadly strikes. Then, with a single fluid motion, he grabbed a fallen blade from the ground. The weapon was too big for him, designed for warriors twice his size. But he lifted it with ease. Zara's breath caught in her throat. He wasn't fighting like a desperate man trying to survive. He was fighting like a predator. The beast roared, charging again. The human stepped forward this time. No hesitation, no fear. He dodged left, then struck. The blade sliced through the beast's arm. A scream of pain filled the arena. The laughter in the crowd stopped. Ziara's heart pounded. No one had ever lasted this long against the beasts. The human kept moving, kept attacking, never slowing down. It was almost like he was enjoying it. The beast, now bleeding, grew desperate. It swung both arms wildly, trying to crush him. The human leaped into the air. Time seemed to slow. He twisted midair, bringing his blade down, right into the beast's skull. The crowd fell silent. The beast collapsed, unmoving. Ziara gripped the bars of her cell. The human, he won. No fear, no hesitation, only victory. And for the first time in her life, Ziara felt something strange. Hope. The human who would not fall. The arena stood in stunned silence. Thousands of alien spectators, warlords, merchants, and mercenaries had come for their usual entertainment, expecting to see another helpless fighter crushed. But now, their laughter had turned to shock. The beast that was supposed to tear the human apart lay lifeless in the sand, its massive body still, its head split open by a blade too large for the hands that wielded it. In the middle of the arena, Daniel Carter stood tall, chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. He wiped the sweat from his brow, flicking away some of the beast's black blood. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face was calm, focused, like a soldier in battle. From her dark cell, Princess Ziara gripped the iron bars, her violet eyes wide. She had seen thousands of warriors step into this arena. None had fought like this human. None had survived. Above, on a golden throne high above the battlefield, Warlord Gornak's massive frame tensed. His thick, scaled fingers curled into fists. His amusement was gone, replaced with fury. Impossible, he muttered under his breath. His deep voice rumbled through the arena. Then he stood, raising his heavy arms. The crowd snapped out of their silence and erupted into wild cheers. It didn't matter that they had expected Daniel to die. They had just witnessed something new, something that had never happened before. Gornak narrowed his reptilian eyes, studying the human below. This was no ordinary prisoner. This human was dangerous. He turned to his second-in-command, a brute with cybernetic arms. "Who is he?" The officer checked a small holographic pad, scrolling through the prisoner records. Daniel Carter. No criminal record. No known military service. Caught in a border raid. Just another lost traveler. Gornak growled. That was not just another traveler. Down below, Daniel knew all eyes were on him. He turned, scanning the roaring audience, then looked up, straight at Gornak. Then he pointed at him. The entire arena gasped. Ziara's breath caught in her throat. No one had ever dared to challenge Gornak directly. The warlord's deep chuckle sent a ripple of unease through the spectators. "You amuse me, human." His voice boomed across the battlefield. "You think yourself a warrior. You think you can defy me." Daniel tilted his head. Wasn't much of a fight. Got anything tougher? The crowd roared again, louder this time. They didn't know what to make of him. A human mocking the warlord. Unheard of. Gornak's amusement vanished. He raised one clawed hand, signaling to his guards. "Fine. Let's see how long your foolishness lasts." The heavy gates of the arena slammed open again. From the darkness, a new opponent emerged. Ziara sucked in a sharp breath. It wasn't another beast. It was a warrior. And not just any warrior. Gornak the Executioner. The arena shook with excitement. Gornak was the warlord's personal champion. A mercenary assassin with cybernetic limbs, enhanced reflexes, and a reputation that stretched across the galaxy. No one had ever lasted more than a few seconds against him. Daniel stretched his neck, rolling his shoulders as the massive warrior approached. He was taller, stronger, and his mechanical arms were lined with retractable blades. A true monster. Ziara gritted her teeth. The human had been impressive, but this fight was different. Daniel, however, showed no fear. Gornak charged. A metallic blur, faster than anything Daniel had fought before. The first blade slashed. Daniel barely dodged, twisting the way at the last second. The second blade stabbed forward. Daniel blocked it with his stolen sword, but the impact nearly knocked him off his feet. Ziara's heart pounded. The human was fast, but not fast enough. Gernek's third strike came faster than Daniel could react, slamming into his ribs. Daniel staggered back. Pain exploded in his side. He tasted blood. The crowd cheered. The match was shifting. Gernek didn't slow down. His cybernetic limbs whirred, his speed increasing. Slash, stab, strike. Daniel barely kept up. His movements became slower. Ziara's fingers dug into the metal bars. No, he was losing. Then something changed. Daniel stopped backing away. His stance shifted. His breathing calmed. Ziara saw it happen. She didn't know how, but in that moment, he adapted. Gernek lunged again, but this time, Daniel was ready. He didn't dodge wildly. He sidestepped with precision. Gernek's blade missed him by inches. The cybernetic warrior snarled, attacking faster, but Daniel's movements were sharper now. He had memorized Gernek's attack patterns. Ziara gasped. He was learning. Gernek roared, launching a final powerful strike, but Daniel was already moving. He ducked, spun inside the warrior's reach, and in one clean motion, buried his sword straight into Gernek's chest. Silence. Gernek's glowing cybernetic eyes dimmed. He fell. The arena went still. Ziara's heart slammed against her ribs. Gornak, the warlord, rose from his throne, his fury burning. Daniel slowly pulled his sword free. He turned his gaze upward, locking eyes with the warlord again. Then he did something no one expected. He smirked. The warlord's rage boiled over. Enough, he roared. You want a real challenge, human. You want to prove yourself. Fine. He pointed at Daniel. Win one more fight, and you earn your freedom. Daniel wiped his blade. Sounds good. Ziara shook her head. He had no idea what was coming next. Gornak leaned forward, his cruel smile returning. Bring out the Dreadmancer. The crowd gasped in terror. Ziara's blood ran cold. The Dreadmancer was not a warrior. He was something far, far worse. And even Daniel Carter might not survive. The deal with the devil. The crowd fell into a hushed murmur, their excitement replaced with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Even the most hardened warriors in the stands shifted uncomfortably at the warlord's words. The Dreadmancer. The name alone carried a weight of horror. Daniel Carter's smirk faded just a little as he glanced around. He didn't know what a Dreadmancer was, but judging by the sudden shift in the crowd's energy, it wasn't going to be a simple brawl. Above the battlefield, Warlord Gornak grinned. You're lucky, human, he growled. You have proven yourself. Interesting. So I will make this more entertaining. He gestured to his guards. If you defeat the Dreadmancer, he will not only earn your freedom, but a reward. The murmurs in the crowd turned into whispers. Gornak pointed to the dark cell above the arena, where Princess Ziara stood behind the bars. Ziara's breath caught in her throat. The crowd erupted with cheers and cruel laughter. Daniel's expression hardened. He looked up at the princess, studying her for a moment. Ziara's face remained emotionless, but inside, she was furious. She had already lost her kingdom. She refused to be treated like a prize in some barbaric game. The warlord's deep laughter filled the air. Win, human, and you walk away free, with the last princess of Zafaria at your side. Lose, and your body will be fed to the sandworms. Daniel exhaled through his nose. All that for just one more fight, he said, stretching his arms. Man, you guys really don't like me winning. The crowd laughed again, but Ziara noticed something. Daniel wasn't afraid. Not even a little. The air grew heavy as the gates of the arena rumbled open. A dark mist poured into the battlefield, creeping across the sand like an unnatural fog. A terrible, bone-chilling sound followed, a whispering, a low voice speaking in a language that did not belong in this world. From the mist, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked in shadows. A twisted, skeletal hand peeked from under its robe. Its eyes, they were not eyes at all, just two endless, black voids that sucked the light out of the air. Even Gornak's guards took a step back. The Dreadmancer was no warrior. It was a creature of nightmare. The fight begins. Daniel felt it immediately. The moment the Dreadmancer stepped onto the battlefield, the air became heavier. His muscles tensed. His breath slowed. Something was wrong. A cold sensation crawled up his spine, whispering in his mind. A voice. Give up, human. Your body is weak. Your mind is weak. You cannot fight me. Daniel shook his head, forcing the thoughts out. The Dreadmancer raised its skeletal hand. The sand beneath Daniel's feet shifted. Suddenly, something grabbed his ankle. He looked down. A rotting hand was clawing out of the ground. And another. And another. The dead were rising. Daniel jumped back, barely avoiding the grasp of the skeletal hands. The Dreadmancer did not move. It watched, studied him. Ziara clenched her fists. He's not like the others, she told herself. He won't fall for fear. Daniel focused. The Dreadmancer fought with the mind, not just the body. It wanted him to be afraid. It wanted him to believe he couldn't win. Daniel tightened his grip on his sword. All right, he thought. Two can play this game. The counterattack. The moment the first undead warrior lunged at him, Daniel moved. He spun left, ducked, then drove his sword forward, straight through the creature's ribcage. The undead collapsed into dust. The Dreadmancer tilted its head, as if amused. Then it raised both hands. The battlefield shook. More bodies crawled from the earth. A dozen, maybe more. Daniel took a deep breath. Adapt. Don't fight them one by one. Fight the master. The last stand. Daniel charged, straight at the Dreadmancer. The crowd gasped. The Dreadmancer raised its hand again, but this time, Daniel was faster. Before the sorcerer could react, Daniel leaped into the air. Blade raised. The Dreadmancer's void-like eyes widened. For the first time in centuries, it felt fear. Daniel swung down. The blade connected. A shockwave exploded through the arena. The mist vanished. The undead crumbled into dust. The Dreadmancer fell. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, the arena erupted. Daniel had won. Again. Aftermath. The deal is sealed. Gornak stood frozen, his face twisted with rage. And something else. Fear. The human had defeated the Dreadmancer. Something no one in the galaxy had ever done before. Ziara's heart pounded in her chest. What kind of warrior is he? Daniel flicked his sword, shaking off the black dust. Then, without looking up, he spoke. I believe you promised me my freedom. The crowd cheered wildly. Gornak clenched his jaw, his claws digging into the armrest of his throne. He had been outplayed. His own rules, his own deal. And now he had to let the human go. His lips curled in a sneer. Fine, human. He spat the words like poison. Take your freedom. Take the girl. But remember this. His yellow eyes burned with hatred. This is not over. Daniel smirked again. I never thought it was. Ziara, still gripping the bars, felt something she had not felt in a long, long time. Hope. The guards unlocked her cage. The last princess of Zephyria was free. And beside her, the human who would not fall. The battle that shocked the universe. The steel doors groaned as they swung open, spilling Princess Zara into the harsh arena sands. Her legs were weak from weeks of captivity, but she forced herself to stand tall. She would not let them see her stumble. Daniel Carter, the human who had fought like a demon and defied death itself, stood beside her. He rolled his shoulders, dusting off his tattered shirt as if he had just walked out of a bar fight instead of battling a nightmare from beyond the stars. Above them, Warlord Gornak's golden throne gleamed in the torchlight. The warlord's scaled fingers tightened around the armrests. His face was carefully neutral, but Zyra saw the truth in his yellow reptilian eyes. He was afraid. Not of her. Not of the crowd. Of Daniel. No one had ever survived the Dreadmancer. No one had ever defied the warlord's arena and walked away breathing. Until now. The crowd was still roaring in disbelief. Warriors from across the stars. Battle-hardened killers who had watched countless champions fall were whispering the same question to one another. What was this human? Daniel smirked as he turned to Zyra. Not exactly the royal escort you were hoping for, ah. Zyra glanced at him, barely hiding her surprise. No fear. No hesitation. He had just fought an undead horror, and yet he was acting like this was just another Tuesday. She lifted her chin. You think this is over? Daniel's smirk widened. It is if you want it to be. She hesitated. No, this was not over. The warlord might have given them their freedom, but Zyra knew men like him. Gornak didn't lose. He didn't just let his enemies walk away. He was already planning something, and Zyra wasn't the only one who knew it. Daniel turned back toward the throne, crossing his arms. So, what now, big guy? You let us walk out of here, or are you gonna change the rules again? The crowd held its breath. Gornak's clawed fingers drummed against his throne. His yellow eyes flickered to the guards at the edge of the arena, then back to Daniel. Then, he laughed. A deep rolling laugh that sent a chill through the air. My dear human, he said, his voice dripping with amusement. You misunderstand. The laughter spread through the stands, warriors and criminals chuckling along with their master. Zyra's hands clenched into fists. Something was wrong. You won your fight, yes, Gornak continued, rising to his feet. You earned your freedom. He spread his massive arms. But did I ever say I would let you leave? The crowd roared again. Daniel's smirk disappeared. Zyra's heart slammed against her ribs. The warlord was betraying the deal. Gornak leaned forward, his scaled lips curling. I am a man of my word, human. I will not stop you from leaving. Then his voice dropped, and his smile turned cruel. But let us see if you can survive the journey. The entire arena floor rumbled. Zyra spun as the sand beneath them shifted. The ground split open. Chains whipped out from hidden doors in the floor, snapping toward them like vipers. Daniel moved fast, too fast. Zyra barely saw it happen. One moment he was standing beside her. The next, he was grabbing her wrist and yanking her backward. The chains missed them by inches. But the arena was changing. Massive steel barricades rose from the ground, trapping them. Gornak's booming voice echoed through the arena. I hope you enjoyed your warm-up, human. Daniel spun to face him, jaw tightening. You cheating son of a... Boom. A new gate slammed open. And from the darkness, something massive stepped forward. Zyra's blood went cold. Daniel let out a low whistle. All right, he muttered. That's new. The war beast was unlike anything she had ever seen. Standing over 15 feet tall, its body was a mass of shifting armor plates and muscle. 4 red eyes gleamed like molten fire, and its massive claws dripped with venom. A genetically engineered monster, built for one purpose: to kill. The crowd went wild. Zyra felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Terror. She had seen this beast before. It was Gornak's failsafe. When a warrior proved too strong, when someone threatened the warlord's power, this was how he erased them. Zyra turned to Daniel. We need to run. Daniel tilted his head, considering. Then, to her absolute shock, he grinned. Nah, he said, rolling his shoulders. Let's see what it's got. Then, he attacked. The fight that shook the universe. The war beast lunged first. Daniel dodged left, rolling beneath its massive claw. Sand exploded where he had been standing a second ago. Ziara stumbled back, eyes wide. He was fast, but the beast was faster. It twisted midair, swinging a second claw toward him. Too fast to dodge. Daniel had no choice. He caught the blow. Ziara's heart stopped. Daniel's boots slid across the sand, his arms straining against the monster's strength. For a moment, she thought he would be crushed. Then, he pushed back. A sound like cracking thunder filled the air as Daniel threw the war beast off balance. The crowd screamed in disbelief. The war beast regained its footing, its red eyes flashing. Then, for the first time in its life, it hesitated. Ziara saw it. The fear. This human, this impossible creature, was not afraid. The war beast let out an earth-shaking roar. It charged. Daniel charged too. Ziara barely saw what happened next. There was a flash of steel, a blur of movement. And then, silence. The war beast stood still. A heartbeat passed. Then its head fell from its shoulders. The arena went completely, utterly silent. Daniel exhaled. Ha! He looked at his blade, then back at the fallen monster. That wasn't so bad. Ziara just stared at him. Who was this human? Above them, Gornek's face twisted in pure rage. For the first time, the warlord had no words. Daniel pointed his sword at him. Now, he said, voice calm, we're leaving. And this time, no one dared to stop them. The great escape. The arena was silent. No chants, no roars, no celebrations, only shock. The war beast, the undefeatable monster that had turned warriors into broken corpses for years, lay still in the blood-stained sand. Its head, severed in a single, impossible strike, rested beside its massive body. The human, Daniel Carter, stood victorious, sword in hand, not a trace of fear on his face. Princess Ziara had never seen anything like this. No one had. Even the most feared gladiators had never lasted a minute against the beast. But Daniel, he made it look easy. Up above, Warlord Gornak seethed. His thick fingers dug into his throne's armrests, his scaled face darkening with fury. This wasn't just an upset. This was humiliation. A mere human, a creature so weak that most species barely considered them worth enslaving, had shattered his arena's legend. Worse, he had done it with a smile. Daniel tilted his head, eyes locking onto the warlords. All right, he said, tapping his sword against his boot. That's 3 fights. I believe you owe us a door. The crowd shifted, waiting. Gornak's jaw tightened. He had no choice. He had given his word. Publicly. And while he was a warlord, a tyrant, a slaver, he was not a liar. His empire thrived on the illusion that his rules were absolute. If he broke them now, if he openly refused to honor his own deal, his rule would crumble. But there was something else. Something far more dangerous. Daniel Carter wasn't just strong. He wasn't just skilled. He was inspiring. Zara could see it in the faces of the gladiators, the mercenaries, even the guards lining the arena walls. The way they watched him. The way they started to believe. That was why Gornak was hesitating. Daniel wasn't just winning fights. He was changing the rules. And if there was one thing a tyrant feared more than defeat, it was hope. Gornak's forked tongue flicked out. His mind worked fast, calculating. Then, slowly, he nodded. The human has won his freedom, he declared, his voice echoing across the stone walls. And the princess is his to take. Ziara's fists tightened. She hated the way he said it, like she was a trophy, like she had no say. But she kept her mouth shut, because now was not the time for pride. Now was the time to leave. Gornak gestured, and with a heavy groan, the gates to the arena creaked open. Daniel turned to Ziara. Well, princess, he sheathed his sword, raising an eyebrow. Shall we? She exhaled sharply. You are reckless. He grinned. And you are welcome. She sighed but stepped forward, matching his stride, as they crossed the blood-stained sands. The moment they reached the tunnel leading out, Daniel whispered, "They're going to try something." Ziara didn't need to ask what he meant. Of course, Gornak wouldn't let them just walk out of here. She could feel the tension in the air. The guards standing along the tunnel were stiff, waiting. She glanced at Daniel. "What's the plan?" He smiled, eyes sharp. "Oh, I was hoping you had one." Ziara huffed. Typical. Then, the attack came. The ambush. The tunnel erupted in chaos. Blaster fire lit up the darkness as Gornak's elite guards sprung their trap. Ziara spun, dodging the shot as she grabbed a fallen blade from the ground. Daniel? He was already moving. Fast. Before the first guard could react, Daniel was in front of him. A punch, straight to the jaw. The guard collapsed. Daniel whipped around, grabbing another by the wrist, twisting just enough to turn the alien's own blade against him. Ziara barely had time to keep up. This wasn't just fighting. This was flow. Daniel moved like a storm, every motion sharp, controlled, deadly. He wasn't fighting like a gladiator. He was fighting like a soldier. Ziara slashed her stolen sword across another guard's chest, spinning as she caught another's wrist. "Who are you?" she demanded, breathless. Daniel grinned. A guy who really doesn't like cages. They cut through the ambush like wildfire. The last guard hit the ground, groaning. Daniel exhaled. That was fun. Ziara glared at him. That was reckless. He grinned wider. "Still here, aren't we?" She hated that he was right, but there was no time to argue. A loud alarm blared, filling the tunnels with red light. Ziara grabbed Daniel's wrist. "We need a ship. Now." The hangar escape. The tunnel spilled into a massive hangar bay. Ships lined the walls, some stolen, some newly constructed. Daniel's eyes gleamed. "Whoa, I like this part." Ziara shoved him forward. "Move." Behind them, more guards flooded in. The closest ship was an old smuggler's freighter, its hull dented, its engines flickering. Not ideal, but it would have to do. Daniel ran for it. "You fly." Ziara scoffed. "I was piloting warships before you were born." Daniel smirked. "Now you're just showing off." They raced up the ramp, blaster fire hissing past them. Ziara slammed her hand on the controls, sealing the doors shut. Daniel dropped into the co-pilot's seat. Engines ready. Ziara's fingers danced across the controls. "Give me a second." "We don't have a second." The hangar doors rumbled open. A massive warship hovered outside. Ziara's stomach sank. Gornak's fleet. Daniel leaned back. "Well," he said, stretching. "This just got interesting." Ziara shot him a glare. "You are insane." He grinned. "And you are welcome." The ship's engines roared. And then, they took off. Straight into a war zone. A warrior's oath. The stolen freighter tore through the atmosphere, its aging engines rattling under the strain. Plasma blasts screamed past its hull, fired from the massive warships in pursuit. The sky above the arena had transformed into a battleground. Inside the cockpit, Princess Ziara gripped the control sticks tightly. Her violet eyes scanned the screens, tracking the swarm of enemy ships closing in fast. Daniel Carter, seated beside her, grinned. "This is the part where you tell me we're faster than them, right?" he asked, his voice far too calm for the situation. Ziara clenched her jaw. "Not even close." "Ah, great." The comms crackled. A deep, cold voice filled the cabin. "You cannot run from me, human," Warlord Gornak growled. "You think you have won. No, you have only delayed your suffering." Daniel leaned forward, smirking at the screen. "Hey, Gorny, if you wanted me to stay, you should have asked nicely." Ziara hissed through her teeth. "Are you trying to make him angrier?" "Seems like he's already mad," Daniel shrugged. "Might as well enjoy it." The warlord's slitted yellow eyes narrowed. Enjoy your final moments. Human. Fire. The warships launched a barrage of missiles. Ziara's instincts kicked in. A new war was coming. And the universe would never be the same again. For the first time since she met him, she didn't know what he was thinking. The arrival. The docking bay doors hissed open. A legion of Zephyrian warriors stood at attention, their sleek armor polished, their weapons gleaming under the cold lights. At the front, Captain Ryrek stood tall. His sharp features, silver blue skin, and golden eyes were unmistakably Zephyrian, a war hero loyal to the old empire. Ziara stepped forward, her head high, every movement precise, regal, commanding. This was what she had trained for her entire life. Daniel, on the other hand, "Damn," he muttered behind her. "You guys really know how to make an entrance." Ziara shot him a glare. "Try not to say anything stupid." "No promises." Captain Ryrek's golden eyes narrowed as he looked at Daniel. "This is the human." Daniel gave a lazy salute. Daniel Carter, gladiator champion, professional troublemaker. Ziara groaned. Captain Ryrek did not look amused. "You brought an outsider. He saved my life," Ziara said sharply. Several times, a murmur passed through the gathered warriors. Ryrek studied Daniel. The silence stretched, thick with tension. Then, he inclined his head. "The Zephyrian Empire owes you a debt, human." Daniel smirked. "Good to hear. Any chance that debt includes a warm meal?" The captain did not laugh. Ziara sighed. "Come," Ryrek said. "The council awaits." The truth revealed. The council chamber was massive, its towering pillars engraved with the history of the Zephyrian people. Ziara had stood here once before, as a child, beside her father, before the war. Now she stood alone. Well, almost alone. Daniel lounged beside her, arms crossed, watching the council of elders with a look of mild amusement. The eldest Zephyrian, Lord Valus, leaned forward. His deep blue eyes glowed under the chamber's golden light. "Princess Ziara," he said, "the last heir of the empire." She straightened. "Yes. You have endured much." His gaze shifted, just slightly, to Daniel. "And you have brought us an unusual ally." Daniel grinned. Unusual's one way to put it. Lord Valus ignored him. Ziara hesitated. "I have returned to reclaim my throne." A murmur swept through the chamber. Lord Valus studied her. "And how do you intend to do that?" Silence. Ziara's fingers tightened. She had no army, no fleet, no leverage. And she knew what the elders were thinking. She was a symbol, nothing more. "Then, I'll tell you how," Daniel said, stepping forward. Ziara's eyes widened. "What are you?" He cut her off, addressing the entire council. "You don't need fleets," Daniel said, voice steady. "You don't need armies. You need a spark." The elders frowned. "Explain." Daniel's smirk faded. For the first time since she met him, his expression was serious. "You've been waiting for someone else to bring back your empire," he said. "You've been waiting for the right time, the right moment, the right conditions." His voice hardened. "That time is gone. If you want your world back, you need to take it." The council stirred. Ziara felt her heart pound. "And who, human, will fight for us?" One of the elders scoffed. "You?" Daniel exhaled. "Yeah." Silence. Daniel crossed his arms. "You're not the only ones who've lost everything. The warlords, the slavers, the corrupt empires. They've made too many enemies. People are waiting for a reason to fight back. We give them one." The room shifted. This was not how things were done. And yet, for the first time, the council was listening. Lord Valus studied Daniel for a long time. Then, he turned to Ziara. "You trust this human?" Ziara looked at Daniel. the reckless, infuriating, impossible warrior who had saved her life, defied death, and faced down an empire without flinching. She took a slow breath and nodded. "Yes," she said, "I do." Daniel glanced at her, raising an eyebrow. She ignored him. Lord Valus sighed. "Then let it be so." He turned to the rest of the council. "The princess has returned. A new war begins." The chamber erupted. The beginning of legends. Later, as they stood on the balcony of the flagship, overlooking the stars, Zara turned to Daniel. "You could have left," she said. "Why are you still here?" Daniel watched the stars, silent. Then, he smiled. "You know," he said, voice softer than usual. "For the first time in a long time, I think I found something worth fighting for." Zara felt her breath catch. She looked at him, this human warrior, standing beside her. Not as a prisoner, not as a gladiator, not as a bodyguard, but as an ally, as a legend, as the first human in history to help rebuild an empire. She smirked. "Try not to die, then." Daniel chuckled. "No promises." Above them, the warship engines rumbled. A new war was coming. And the universe would never be the same again. A new war was coming. And the universe would never be the same again. For the first time since she met him, she didn't know what he was thinking. The arrival. The docking bay doors hissed open. A legion of Zephyrian warriors stood at attention, their sleek armor polished, their weapons gleaming under the cold lights. At the front, Captain Ryrek stood tall. His sharp features, silver blue skin, and golden eyes were unmistakably Zephyrian, a war hero, loyal to the old empire. Zara stepped forward, her head high, every movement precise, regal, commanding. This was what she had trained for her entire life. Daniel, on the other hand. "Damn," he muttered behind her. "You guys really know how to make an entrance." Zara shot him a glare. "Try not to say anything stupid." "No promises." Captain Ryrek's golden eyes narrowed as he looked at Daniel. "This is the human." Daniel gave a lazy salute. Daniel Carter. Gladiator champion. Professional troublemaker. Zara groaned. Captain Ryrek did not look amused. "You brought an outsider." "He saved my life," Zara said sharply. Several times, a murmur passed through the gathered warriors. Ryrek studied Daniel. The silence stretched, thick with tension. Then, he inclined his head. "The Zephyrian Empire owes you a debt, human." Daniel smirked. "Good to hear. Any chance that debt includes a warm meal?" The captain did not laugh. Zara sighed. "Come," Ryrek said. "The council awaits." The truth revealed. The council chamber was massive, its towering pillars engraved with the history of the Zephyrian people. Zara had stood here once before, as a child, beside her father, before the war. Now she stood alone. Well, almost alone. Daniel lounged beside her, arms crossed, watching the council of elders with a look of mild amusement. The eldest Zephyrian, Lord Valus, leaned forward. His deep blue eyes glowed under the chamber's golden light. "Princess Zara," he said, "the last heir of the empire." She straightened. "Yes. You have endured much." His gaze shifted, just slightly, to Daniel. "And you have brought us an unusual ally." Daniel grinned. Unusual's one way to put it. Lord Valus ignored him. Zara hesitated. "I have returned to reclaim my throne." A murmur swept through the chamber. Lord Valus studied her. "And how do you intend to do that?" Silence. Zara's fingers tightened. She had no army, no fleet, no leverage, and she knew what the elders were thinking. She was a symbol, nothing more. "Then, I'll tell you how," Daniel said, stepping forward. Zara's eyes widened. "What are you?" He cut her off, addressing the entire council. "You don't need fleets," Daniel said, Voice steady. You don't need armies. You need a spark. The elders frowned. Explain. Daniel's smirk faded. For the first time since she met him, his expression was serious. You've been waiting for someone else to bring back your empire, he said. You've been waiting for the right time, the right moment, the right conditions. His voice hardened. That time is gone. If you want your world back, you need to take it. The council stirred. Ziara felt her heart pound. And who, human, will fight for us? One of the elders scoffed. You? Daniel exhaled. Yeah. Silence. Daniel crossed his arms. You're not the only ones who've lost everything. The warlords, the slavers, the corrupt empires. They've made too many enemies. People are waiting for a reason to fight back. We give them one. The room shifted. This was not how things were done. And yet, for the first time, the council was listening. Lord Valus studied Daniel for a long time. Then, he turned to Ziara. You trust this human? Ziara looked at Daniel, the reckless, infuriating, impossible warrior who had saved her life, defied death, and faced down an empire without flinching. She took a slow breath and nodded. Yes, she said. I do. Daniel glanced at her, raising an eyebrow. She ignored him. Lord Valus sighed. Then let it be so. He turned to the rest of the council. The princess has returned. A new war begins. The chamber erupted. The beginning of legends. Later, as they stood on the balcony of the flagship, overlooking the stars, Ziara turned to Daniel. You could have left, she said. Why are you still here? Daniel watched the stars, silent. Then, he smiled. You know, he said, voice softer than usual. For the first time, in a long time, I think I found something worth fighting for. Ziara felt her breath catch. She looked at him, this human warrior, standing beside her. Not as a prisoner, not as a gladiator, not as a bodyguard, but as an ally, as a legend, as the first human in history to help rebuild an empire. She smirked. Try not to die. Then, Daniel chuckled. No promises. Above them, the warship engines rumbled. A new war was coming, and the universe would never be the same again.